Hello, everyone. Welcome to the latest episode of the HR Tech Chat video podcast. And I'm very excited today to have with us Maurik Dippel, and I think I'm saying his name correctly. He is the CEO and co-founder of CircleLytics, and CircleLytics is focused on employee feedback, some very innovative thinking around that with AI and really doing it very little justice with that description. I'll give you an opportunity to describe it. Thank you for joining us today. And I know you're joining us from the Netherlands. Is that correct?
Yep. Yeah. So a few
Excellent.
hours away.
Well, you know what? We have a little bit of in common today, maybe. Because it was actually negative 12 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what that is centigrade, but it's pretty cold today here in New England. So I felt like I was there with you in spirit, at least weather-wise.
Well, we do have some summer days, but you can count them on two hands, I admit. We're now in the same cold as you are.
Yeah.
But that's right. It's all this distance stuff and people in different time zones and working remote, etc. Well, that's basically instantly what we will talk about this afternoon.
Yeah, it's amazing the technology just enables us to have these conversations with people across the globe. I absolutely love it, and I hope to visit the Netherlands sometime. Maybe, Maurik, you could give our viewers just a little bit of insight into what CircleLytics does. And we had a conversation, you and I, maybe almost 2 weeks ago now.
Yep.
And we got pretty deep into it. To me, it's just fascinating. Maybe you could give our viewers just kind of a primer, and then we can take it from there.
Yeah, thanks for introducing me and having us over, Brent. We really appreciate it. And just to pitch it in a few sentences, we want to step up the game of employee listening, of employee engagement. And we saw a few issues with the current methodology of a survey-based solution only. And it doesn't really serve all purposes of HR leadership nor employees. So we thought, let's add a component, an innovation to that, and let's enable employees better to answer open questions with their own answers. And that's a goldmine. Gallup already mentioned that people love to be taken seriously, and we thought, well, let's put that into technology. So we introduced employee dialogues from the cloud to corporates and governments all over the country, and of course also outside the Netherlands and in the US.
I love that idea, and you know what's interesting about it, and there's so much to talk about here, but one thing that pops to mind immediately is just in the industry. I think we're seeing, when it comes to employee experience and gauging employee sentiment and trying to doing our best to help ensure the greatest potential productivity and employee satisfaction with their jobs, right? We're finding that a lot of the old ways, or the conventional, traditional ways of doing things, just don't. They just don't cut it. They're just not up to the job, up to the task. So I see some. It's a broad stroke, but I see some similarities here, so common denominators. So you take for instance you mentioned the employee survey. It's kind of that is an inflexible instrument. A lot of companies, they'll do it once a year. Sure, there's pulse survey capabilities out there, but a lot of companies will do it once a year, and then they'll analyze it, and they'll reach some conclusions about it maybe 3-4 months after it's administered, when the information is no longer current, it's stale. A, B, the questions may not be that were asked
specific.
May not, too specific, not getting at the real insight that you need. And then you look at
exactly.
Go ahead.
You have a few issues with surveys, but they do serve always also a few good purposes. And so you do get generic reporting. You do get an holistic numerical view on a lot of items once every now and then. So that's good of surveys. And if you want to compare yourself with other with peers, then you get a lot of information, and for that you need generic questions that are same throughout the branch. But if you want to address specific matters, engage your people for specific company matters, challenge them to help solve it and understand the why behind the numbers, they need to add open questions to this whole employee engagement arena. So we added that, and we learned that people love it. They embrace it to the max. They're not overwhelmed. They do want to have a say. They do want to be taken seriously. So they type like crazy. And they type all these beautiful answers, and they truly speak up. And the real issue 5 years ago when we started off is that an amazing amount of people join in these dialogues. And in the first round, they start typing, and our database got overflown with responses from employees. So our first customers were really puzzled, like, wow, this is a gold mine. It surprises us. It really adds value compared to surveys, but how to digest this beautiful gold? And so we invented instantly a second round in this process. That's why it's a dialogue instead of a conversation or a meetup or a survey. So we ask people in the first round, what do you think of this and this and this? How do you assess this and this? Please explain why. How to improve ABC? Why? What obstacle can we take away to increase the uptake of ABC, and why? So we ask a lot of why. We really put them to work, and they love it. In the second round, we allow them to review anonymized answers from other colleagues.
Okay.
And there the learning starts. Okay. So we introduce a collective round right after an individual round. That's why it's a dialogue. An interesting thing, Brent, is that we see people actually having second thoughts for the question you put to them. So in the second round, they review and they view different people's answers, different perspectives, and it actually makes them progress their thinking and have new thoughts and actually embrace answers that they didn't think of themselves. So you have a much smarter, more accurate outcome of what's really eating the people, what's really out there, what's really there solution-wise, thinking-wise, analysis-wise. You really dig deeper, and that's a level of collective intelligence. It's quite an untapped source of information and engagement in many companies.
I have several questions. So, in observations. So first of all, it's just occurred to me, listening to you describe this, how would any organization really get to the bottom of any type of pernicious issue or fundamental challenge without engaging in this particular process? That's one question of mine. It's more of a rhetorical question. I think the answer is there. You couldn't. B, it's you think about an annual survey. It's an employee. They often call it an employee engagement survey, where you're measuring, ostensibly measuring employee engagement, whereas what you're doing with your process is you're actually cultivating engagement while exploring employee engagement. And yeah.
That's it. Can I use that sentence?
Yes, you may.
Yeah. Well, that's actually it. And what I mentioned in the beginning, we were a bit struck by this survey fatigue thing going on, and we weren't that much convinced 6 years ago while researching this market of employee engagement. We weren't so much convinced that turning a survey into a pulse survey would solve that matter. It's still a survey. And then we noticed that people actually are full of ideas and opinions. And now they don't share it with HR nor with leadership. They share it with each other. Or they leave the company, or they just get a bit of disengaged. And we thought, wow, why not turn it around, disrupt that employee engagement survey and enable people to speak up. So you can actually apply the same questions you used for an employee engagement survey in our instrument. But you add to that comma and what's your key recommendation to improve this score. So you actually reach out to potential, and people just they give it all to you. Just ask.
Now, this is interesting because what you're describing is let me see if I can describe this, a recouping or a okay, so over the course of the regular operation of an organization, right? I would say that there's a and I don't know if there's a survey out there that's sort of figured this out, if there's a percentage, but I imagine, I'm hypothesizing that there's a certain percentage of innovation that's uncaptured innovation, or unrealized, that's the word, unrealized innovation. And it's because of some of the things that you described. An employee just leaves, they had an idea, but they never shared it with anyone. They leave for whatever reason, whether it's related to that idea or not is, that's separate. Or they talk about it with themselves, but it never makes its way to leadership. It's just myriad potential reasons why innovation, it's latent. There's latent, I think that's what latent innovation. It's not happening, right? And so, so thinking about this sort of, theoretically, I would say that it's probably impossible to ensure that 100% of the potential latent innovation in your organization definitely happens, but there are ways to optimize or to increase the realization of currently latent innovation in your organization. And to me, this is one of the ways of doing so, is actually fostering or encouraging these conversations. It's in addition to many other things, it's a catalyst for innovation, is it not?
It's a catalyst for innovation. That's one use case.
Okay.
And but first of all, our initial focus now is that HR does struggle with the follow-up of employee engagement pulse surveys. They have numbers, but they don't know the why. They cascade reporting down to management teams, and they stimulate them to dig deeper and find out the why and work on that with their teams and departments and regions and districts in which you have. They are puzzling because they need to have a conversation with their team. Well, when do you get all your team members in one room? One manager said to me, I have 300 people in 6 countries. To get them in one Teams meeting, to follow up on an employee engagement survey report that says that they don't like so much the L&D effort of the company and the D&I, and it isn't. I just have numbers. So what will be my first question in a non-anonymized process where all psychological safety evaporates? It's time inefficient, it's unsafe, and it's ineffective. So it takes a month to have these breakdown and all these sessions with team members and to find out, guys, why did you score me this low this year? So we say to HR, solve that matter by introducing employee dialogue as a substitute or follow-up of your employee engagement survey. And then you facilitate management teams to instantly dive deeper with questions as what we had with a recent Philips case. They lifted out 2 low scoring and 2 high scoring items that are very important for the company effort in that continent. And they repeated the same question in CircleLytics, and they said, and can you elaborate on the why behind your score? And then in the second round, people started to score each other's answer and actually prioritize which answers are more feasible and more relevant than others. And they pushed up all the elements that made more sense. And so management, within 1 week, they could act upon it. That's a different game. Yes, it's also a catalyst for innovation. It's a catalyst for transformation. It's a catalyst for culture, for behavior, to understand risks. And so we see a lot of use cases. And so 70% of our attention is focused on HR leadership to introduce employee dialogue to them.
That's interesting.
I'll be all over the place.
Well, I have a few questions now around this. So one, I'd like to get into, it would be great to get into some of the, what's the methodology behind this, for instance. And I know that machine learning and to a certain extent artificial intelligence are involved in this, but I'd like to talk a little bit first about where does HR sit in this? Is this, when you're talking to organizations, or is it usually HR that obviously HR is typically the one that's the department, the division that's driving the engagement survey, right? But when it comes to these types of conversations and facilitating them and making them happen, is that also an HR play, or do you find that you're speaking with all sorts of folks throughout the organization when you're beginning your own engagement with a new user, for instance? Yeah.
Well, good question, and there's not one answer to that. So I'll split it up in 3 and limit myself to that. A large hospital is introducing these dialogues now on team level. Individual management teams use it for their individual teams of like 40 to 80 people. They run regular employee dialogues. In addition, the hospital runs an annual employee engagement survey, serving different purposes. The choices made to apply these employee dialogues were made in the end by the board, not by HR, because it's much more. It's a more leadership choice than a technology choice.
Right.
So that's one case that we see. Another case is that some companies really are running towards the end of a contract with a survey provider. And they're out there and beauty contesting now more innovative solutions. So one of the larger brewery companies in the world is actually now in RFP process and asking us, can we step up the game of surveys, because we are considering to substitute them. So then it's really substitution. And the third case is that it's quality control, it's customer research, innovation, and other departments that are using this tool just for the collective intelligence aspect of it. Yes, it engages like crazy, but their main responsibility is not to increase engagement. The main responsibility is to manage risk, to increase quality, to speed up innovation. So they use the instrument as an intervention for behavior, for alignment, and to capture the intelligence of the group.
Well, now see, that's you brought up a really interesting point there. Engagement, we measure engagement because we know, or we assume that the well-worn premise is that, if your engagement is good, then all these other things are going to be better, right? But to me, it seems, and this might be a little bit premature, or I don't know if it's too much of a leap, but to me, it seems like it might be better just to address those things, just to go straight for the outcomes, or affecting the outcomes that you think engagement is probably a measurement of, right? That's one
there's
thing.
D&I, there's collaboration, there's L&D, there's all kinds of things. So it's better to instantly address with the owner of that topic, to instantly address with the relevant audience the item as such. And so we have companies that have a retention matter. Well, many companies have a retention challenge. And so with the person responsible for retention, you find the right audience. People that just left the company, you still have the addresses. Get in dialogue with them. Understand, not with exit interviews, but understand from the people that recently left the companies, what would be a key consideration to ever come back? What would be a compelling reason to have stayed at the company? What reasons couldn't you share with us in an exit interview, but are relevant for our company? And then a big thank you. In 2 rounds, get it all prioritized, and you tap the intelligence from a group for instantly having a very beautiful intervention regarding retention. Ask the people that recently onboarded in the last 2 to 6 months. Don't only introduce them to courses and how to get into the office and get their password, but also ask them an outside insider's look.
Okay.
How did our company exceed expectations? Would you apply for this job again today? What would be your key reason? So understand the deeper drivers of people considering staying, considering leaving, or leaving the company. Yes, it engages. Yes, you include all people. Yes, you tick the box of inclusion. Yes, you tap the diversity of brains of people. So it's indeed, you do use the beautiful diversity of all these brains all together in solving your matter.
A couple things strike me. First of all, that kind of...
Will your question be, in 10 years, are there still employee engagement surveys?
Well, we can get to that question.
I don't know.
I don't know. I don't. The thing is, that kind of information, that those kinds of testimonials, essentially what you're talking about right now, that would be good information, even anonymized, for an employer's recruiting website, for instance, right? The careers page. That just occurred to me now. What's interesting? It's an engagement survey might be a good way to measure the success or effectiveness of a CircleLytics project, right? So you've done this, and I would imagine, have you seen this? Have you seen that the employee engagement scores and through the traditional survey administered after you've gone through an engagement with a user? Have you seen those scores improve?
No, for that we are too new in the market.
Okay.
And that's one. What we do have at the end of each dialogue, so it's composed of 2 rounds, asynchronous rounds,
Mm.
asynchronous rounds. And after that second round, we do ask you to what extent you enjoy this dialogue.
Okay.
How do you think of it? And they can rate us between 1 and 5. So we are reaching now, we almost approached 1 million employees and participants over the course of a few years. We are scaling up, so we're still small. And we have from tens of thousands of participants, we got their rating. And we score an average of 4.1 on the 5-point scale.
Oh, wow.
Of them enjoying this way of being included and being listened to. And they know in the second round that they know upfront that it might not be their idea and their opinion that will matter most to the company and representing the collective of employees. It might be totally different ideas that get most support in the second round for most employees. But they're okay with that. So let me phrase it in a different way. With surveys, they're used to being approached as an individual. With dialogues, they get used to being approached as an individual, but in the second round, also be part of a collective. Learn from others, listen to different perspectives, become a bit wiser, a bit better informed. And then we ask, do you still think the same as you did a week ago? What's your new thinking? And that's the thinking we capture. That's the thinking that is disclosed in the end, at the end of dialogue in a dashboard. We add a bit of AI, we add a bit of machine learning, we add some very front-running text analysis, and you get an instant real-time result in your dashboard that you can quickly turn into action.
Can you talk a little bit more about the machine learning and how that works over time as you do more and more of these with say any one user?
Yeah, well, I can't tell you so much. The second round algorithm is quite complex, and imagine that these dialogues are run also with 10,000s of people at the same time. So when you have for 3 questions asked in this first round, you get 10,000s of texts back. And the algorithm redistributes that in small subsets that have as least as possible lookalikes in each individual set of answers from other people. Actually, every employee in the second round encounters quite a variety of perspectives and answers from other people. And that's quite complex. And what we do learn, and our algorithm learns from their behavior. We know what your opinion was, for example, regarding the L&D strategy, our company's L&D efforts of last 3 months. We know what you think of that. You wrote that down. We know what you encounter in the second round. We know what other people's opinions use. And we know how you moved your thinking from what you said. We analyze your text and we see for what other opinions you are actually now expressing your support for. And the algorithm is learning from that behavior. And that's extremely interesting. We learned there, for example, that that people don't have the tendency to look for answers in the second round that resemble their own. So they're open for new ways of thinking. So if you ask, what's our key obstacle why project ABC got delayed like this? And it's strategic matter, so please put some efforts in it. And you ask that question to the people, they come up with all kinds of obstacles and issues and matter. And in the second round, they start favoriting and giving support for ideas and response from others that were simply better. And they don't care that it wasn't theirs. So there's something collectively going on, which is also a cultural matter. That's why it's much more a choice of leadership. Employee engagement is not a selection of a tool. It's a leadership decision. How do I want to run and engage my people?
One thing that strikes me about this that's really interesting is this is, this is sort of the ethical diametric opposite of what we see, say, in some of the consumer social media realms, where the algorithm actually ensures that like-minded people just end up interacting mostly with like-minded people, and we end up with sort of, a balkanized situation where people aren't understanding each other's views and aren't exposed to each other's views. This is the exact opposite, and of course, why would you not do it this way in a business setting? Because you want to ensure the highest likelihood of organizational success, and that and part and parcel of that is reaching accord and all these sorts of things. So that's very interesting to me. One thing that came up during our previous conversation that I just want to bring up again, because it's very interesting, and and there's a little bit of a tie-in with some other of the podcasts that we've done here with HR Tech Chat. Is this idea that, and I'm going to try to do my best to describe it quickly and succinctly. So it's the idea that right now in the development of artificial intelligence, it's very, very important to inform the development of AI algorithms with as broad of and inclusive of a spectrum of human sentiment as possible, so that the AI will develop with the broadest understanding, comprehension of the full spectrum of human thinking.
Yes.
And that's very important, because if it doesn't, then we have a saying here in the United States: we're cruising for a bruising, right? Actually, I think it's in the UK too. But anyway, but what you're kind of what you were describing in our previous conversation, and I'm catching it here too, is that it sounds to me like you're doing that within the microcosm of an organization. So your artificial intelligence in your solution is gathering as broad of a spectrum of the employee sentiment as possible.
Yes.
Right, to inform,
Exactly.
to bring about as positive or useful, effective of an outcome as possible.
Yes, and why do we go first back to the employees in the second round instead of pushing all the data in our AI and algorithm, what you have? Because they know better. We ask, what sentiment, what do you think? To what extent does it inspire you? And they can, in the second round, they express their appreciation or support for other people's opinions between a -3 and +3 score. So we have a vector and we have an intensity of their sentiment. And they tag words that matter most to them. They know semantics. They know what's ironic in a company. They know what's a more cynical way of expressing an understatement, or they understand that. Machines don't. Because they don't. We work with Unilever, we did projects for IKEA, for Heineken, Philips, different cultures, different languages, different ways of approaching each other. And the people know best. So when they start valuing other people's perspective in the second round, they leave those scores, tag words, and even comment why. So they express why they see it like that and why they appreciate that idea more than other people's ideas or their own idea. And it's such an appealing, attractive way for them to do so that that more than 70% of the employees review more than 20 items from other colleagues. the second round.
Yeah.
And more than 50% reviews even more than 40 items, more than 40 anonymized answers from other people. They review it and they add scores, tag words, add comments to it. So it's an extreme enrichment, and that's the collective intelligence. And only after that, we add a bit of AI tooling and to get some additional information and some layers of information and some weighted word count instead of flat word count, and all kinds of tools to further analyze the information after the enrichment by the people themselves.
It's very encouraging
and it's fun.
know. Yeah.
Mainly it's fun. They love it. So if they rate us a 4 on a 5-point scale on average for now over 5 years for 300 plus companies now, and for a few thousands dialogues, I think they are expressing. I'm not fatigued. I was survey fatigued, but I'm dialogue happy. I can have you're listening. I can speak up, and I love to hear what others are saying. I don't care if it's better. I don't care. I'm also just one guy or girl. Could be wrong. Well, I'm wrong.
Yeah.
So it's I think it's a relief also for them. No one is looking at them and saying, well, Mark, you have the mic now. You better speak up, and it better be good. No, you can be wrong. Some people say it's this, of course, it's system 1 and system 2 theory of Kahneman, and the fast and slow thinking. You have the fast thinking, and in the second round, you need reflection and to learn from others and do a bit of slow thinking.
Yeah, that's, to me, and I'm looking at the time, and just to kind of tie this into the broader spectrum of what's happening in HCM today, whether you look at, performance management or employee engagement surveys or whatever, we're moving away from these inflexible sort of annual or very rigidly cadenced processes that are sort of not purposely, but just inherently sort of top down, not necessarily very interactive processes that are not very good at harnessing, capturing some of these nuances that you need to understand to bolster employee sentiment and all these kinds of. We're moving away from that to much more collaborative processes, whether it's what we've been talking about today, you and me, right? Or we're talking about maybe continuous performance enablement, all these types of things where it's much more collaborative. The technology is finally got to the point where we're able to do what we've maybe have, I don't want to get too hokey here, but maybe have unconsciously wanted to do the whole time, right? We're kind of moving away from the old ways and really moving into a future of work. I mean, honestly, this is the future of work right here. This collaborative, technology facilitated new way that's no longer rigid, no longer inflexible. It's much more collaborative and interactive. That's if I were to sort of put a stamp on it in terms of the big picture, that to me, what you do with CircleLytics is just another really, really rich example of this move into the future of work.
Yeah, well, I like to think so.
Yeah, well,
and I love to see, Brent, I love to see so much comments from the participating employees that they say, wow, gee, you can ask me for anything, or finally, or what you never ask. And they really are, you show them trust. So you become much more high trusting culture in enabling employees to understand really management's key worries and key challenges and ask them, collaborate with me a bit, think with me, and help me solve it together. So you emphasize a bit more of this together aspect, and that means collaboration. And I believe that's much more the future of work, instead of being all these individuals that in some way have to be forced to collaborate. It's more natural to collaborate, and I think we facilitate it very much.
And you're very much supporting the evolution of organizational culture, which absolutely hinges on trust, feeling heard, and all these types of things. It's really fascinating. Maurik, thank you for joining us for this episode of the podcast. This has been just an absolutely fascinating conversation.
Likewise. Thank you.
Thank you.